and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another little, what I'm calling a mini episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein. Like I said, just a truly quick hit episode, a little solo episode, unplanned. Been watching Summer House with bated breath, like I'm sure a lot of you are, looking for those threads and clues about what's going to lead up to the controversial breakup between one Carl Radke and one Lindsay Hubbard. And obviously we got a pretty controversial episode 2 weeks ago now, where Carl and Lindsay got into an argument, and Lindsay seemed to have what I think most of us are in agreement with, an overreaction to a certain situation that, interestingly, is shedding new light on the breakup. And I just want to say, as a little side note here, this is why it's so important never to really rush to judgment before we have all the information. I see this happen all the time where news leaks about something that's going on in a show and people just rush to judgment about what's going on and what it means and who's to blame. Carl got a lot of heat for breaking up with Lindsay, and we'll get there. And I have to imagine there is responsibility on both sides to take. I have to imagine Carl probably did not actually do this perfectly, but I do think it's interesting that now that we're seeing the season play out, there's been kind of a huge turnaround in a lot of the public opinion, whereas a few months ago, people were really ready to vilify Carl without having really any information at hand about what was going on. Now that we are seeing things play out on our screen, well, it's funny. The pendulum's now swinging far in the other direction where people are 100% blaming Lindsay for everything. That's a whole other story. But this is just to say, and I think I'm naming this because I think that this is not just an important principle in terms of television watching, but more importantly, it's an important principle in terms of life that I think generally it's best never to rush to judgment when we don't have all the information. And certainly when it's a situation where we didn't see or hear it with our own two eyes, our own eyes and ears, you just never know. You never know what's gone down until the information's in front of you. And so that's why with TV especially, I always wait till I can see things on camera with my own eyes and ears before I really kind of rush to any kind of judgment. And I think if there's one thing that reality TV has shown us over the years, it's just how fallible, our points of view can be and how big our blind spots can be. And I just feel like there's so many instances where we watch someone perceive a certain situation. I mean, I don't know why this is coming to mind, but I'm just flashing back way back when to early Beverly Hills and that now infamous game night where Kyle and Kim teamed up on Brandi Glanville. And at that time, Brandi Glanville was very much an underdog. And to hear Kyle and Kim tell this story, Brandi was the aggressor and the villain in the situation, and they were just innocently reacting to her. Of course, us, the viewers, saw a different story unfold, and then bystanders or people who heard about things after the fact, like Lisa Vanderpump, for example, they got to watch it play out on TV with their own eyes and ears, and suddenly they realized it was a different situation than had been originally presented to them. So again, a bit of a digression, but felt called to say this, just the importance of not rushing to judgment when you haven't seen or heard things with your own two eyes, your own two ears, and really sort of all of us doing our due diligence to gather as much information and firsthand evidence as we can before rushing to any sort of verdict or judgment of a situation. Now, having said all that, I was really drawn to this episode and in particular really drawn to Lindsay's heightened reaction and just had an impulse to do a little drop-in and see if I could kind of explore what might have been going on underneath Lindsay's reaction on a deeper level and shed some insight and clarity as to like why she was so, to use her word, activated. I started to get some initial hits just from watching the episode, and then some of those initial hits got confirmed in this past week's episode. So it just made me feel even more, there's something sort of fertile and ripe here that I kind of want to explore within myself around this. So as always, we will hold this loosely. We will hold this as playful exploration, see what themes emerge. And whether it's right or wrong, just kind of use it as a mode of exploration for certain themes and topics that might be relevant to all of us. So, having said that, yeah, I thought I would start really simply. I mean, after all of that pontification about how important it is for us to see things with our own eyes and ears, this is, of course, an example of a situation that actually originates off camera. So we didn't actually get to see the inciting incident between Lindsay and Carl on camera, but we heard about it afterward. So what I'm going to do is just kind of drop into Lindsay. And what we learn about via voiceover narration from Lindsay and Carl is basically that the summer house is going out for the night. They've piled into two different lifts. Lindsay has ended up in a lift with the boys. The rest of the girls are in a separate lift. And Lindsay expresses to Carl, basically, I'm concerned about this. I think what she's saying is that the girls are going to think I intentionally got into a lift with the boys rather than with them. And this is going to be somehow used against me. And that Carl, and in his description, he says he's very calm, responds saying, look, babe, it's not that deep. Don't worry about it. And that Lindsay then kind of interpreted that as sort of being shut down or not validated in her feelings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down into Lindsay in this lift, letting Carl know her concern, and then hearing back from Carl, babe, don't worry, it's not that deep. And let's just sort of see where this takes us. Okay, here we go. Okay, so it's interesting. So as per usual, there's kind of a couple things going on at once. I mean, what I want to say, and this is part of what was coming to me so immediately when I was watching the episode, I think that it can't be stressed enough that Lindsay is actually really impacted by this conflict with the other women in the house. And I'm saying this now because as soon as I dropped in, I mean, even before I could even start to visualize Carl saying, don't worry about it, it's not that deep, I just felt this bracing in my heart. And really what I feel here as Lindsay is like a lot of fear, like a lot. Oh, sorry, even just saying that out loud, like I start to feel a deep sadness here. This is what I'm saying. I think this is the first major thing that perhaps needs to be recognized within and about Lindsay in this situation is I think she really cares deeply about what's going on with the other women in the house. I actually think it hurts her. I think that, yeah, she's very hurt by their perceived rejection. I think she feels excluded. I think she wants to belong. And I think she takes it really personally. And I think it hits her in a very tender place inside of her heart. And I think that is also something she would never want anyone to know. I think that there's like a deeper vulnerability here that Lindsay desperately braces against and guards because, again, there's something in her. Yeah, she doesn't want people to know how much she actually cares. And it's interesting, I've spoken on this podcast before about how I have a soft spot for Lindsay. And part of the reason why I have a soft spot for Lindsay is because I have always sensed this sort of deeper sensitivity and vulnerability in her. And what I've seen throughout the show is that there is a way in which she tends to be at odds with the other women. And I remember even going back as far as season 4, for example, there was an episode where I think Lindsay had a birthday dinner. In that season, Hannah was kind of playing both sides of the house against each other, where Hannah would go to Lindsay and complain about Paige and Amanda. Then Lindsay would try to support Hannah and kind of have her back and offer her input about her insights about Paige and Amanda. And then Hannah would go back to Paige and Amanda and say, oh, well, Lindsay's saying X, Y, and Z about you. Of course, not acknowledging that Lindsay was just responding to Hannah's own complaints about Paige and Amanda. And then that would rile up Paige and Amanda. And I remember one specific episode where, like I said, it was Lindsay's birthday. And Paige and Amanda heard via Hannah some of the things that Lindsay was saying about them. And they got furious with her and they were yelling at her. And this is all just to say, I remember taking Lindsay in. And that's the thing. Lindsay's got a fighter in her. And I remember kind of seeing, like, she almost smiles, when this conflict kicks in and her eyes kind of go a little bit glassy. And again, what I always feel in these moments is actually like a real freezing in her heart. And I think externally what it looks like is one, defensiveness, two, almost like, I want to say like a flippant attitude. Something in her shuts down. But what I've always sensed underneath that, like I said, is a really deep sense of hurt, a really deep sense of feeling excluded. Like, ouch, this hurts. I don't want to let you see this, but this hurts. And it reminds me too of, like, even last season in that kind of climactic conversation between Lindsay and Danielle, where, a lot of people were really triggered by just how cold Lindsay seemed. And again, that was another instance where I remember taking her in and just feeling like, no, this isn't about Lindsay being cold. It's not that she doesn't care. It's she does care and she's hurt. And when she hurts, she shuts the fuck down. That is what I felt about that immediately. And if you remember, that's actually what she said at the reunion. And she literally said, not everyone shows hurt in the same way. And so I'm just sort of saying all this because it lays a groundwork for what I'm feeling now, which is I think Lindsay went into that house this season, like I said, really scared and really bracing herself for more hurtful rejection. And again, not wanting anyone to see that in her. And I think what comes up for me as Lindsay here, before I kind of continue to drop into this more deeply, is I think that Lindsay has some sort of experience or relationship to, like, the experience of almost what I would call like humiliation. It's almost like they hurt me, their rejection hurts me, their exclusion hurts me, but I don't want to let them see how much it hurts me, because if they see how much it hurts me, I could get hurt even more. Like, if they see the impact they have on me, then I'm even more vulnerable. And that's a tender place in me where I could feel even more hurt, shamed, and humiliated. So it's almost like this is sort of where Lindsay gets herself into a bit of a bind, I think, where it's like she puffs up her chest. Like I said, she braces against the vulnerability. She doesn't want to let anyone see the impact of their actions. But then that very bracing, that very puffed up chest, that very freezing, that kind of glimmer in her eye and maybe the slight smile that sort of looks like, she doesn't give a shit or she enjoys this. There's a way in which she shuts her vulnerability down that then continues to push people away even further. There's a way that she gets reactive and defensive, I think, to guard this tender place inside of her that then pisses people off even more. So this is what we do, you guys. We think we're protecting ourselves, and we make these unconscious choices to continue protecting ourselves, not understanding and realizing that those very unconscious choices are the things that keep us locked in our patterns in the first place. So, okay, I'm already saying a lot, but I just want to say, like, number one headline, I think Lindsay went into the house actually very scared and anticipating more rejection. And the last thing I'll say about this too is, like, another moment that really sort of got under people's skin was when she got a little bit bitchy with West. If you remember, I think they were talking about room selection and temperature. And then Lindsay said something along the lines of, yeah, I've lived here for a couple years. Like, she just got bitchy with him. And again, to me, it was the same thing. My first hit on that is, she's nervous. She's anxious. She's scared. And Lindsay doesn't know how, oh God. Sorry, even just saying these words, it's like I'm feeling it. Lindsay doesn't know how to just slow down and say, I'm so scared right now. I'm like protecting my heart right now. I'm so scared these girls are going to be mean to me. I'm so scared of the rejection. I'm so scared I'm going to like have an experience of feeling attacked. Like, again, as I'm saying this, you guys can't see me at home. It's like my fists are clenching. My chest is turning inward. It really is this feeling like I've got to brace myself for attack, and I've got to get my dukes up, and I got to protect this tender heart in me. So that's kind of like the initial sort of foundation I feel for all this. Okay, so if I just stay with this for a second. So I'm in the lift with Carl, and now I'm telling him, like, this is going to be used again. So yeah, this is me anticipating what's coming at me. I'm scared about the storm that's coming my way. I don't quite know how to articulate that. And so then Carl sits there and says, don't worry about it. It's not so deep. So let me just drop into this. So this is what's so interesting. It's like, as Lindsay, my internal experience, like I just said, is I'm really fucking scared. Like, I'm actually really scared. I feel like the internal voice, the interior voice of Lindsay is, I'm really fucking scared. My inner child is fucking scared right now. I need real help and support here. But again, she's not actually saying that, right? She's probably slipping into neurotic Lindsay activated mode. And so Carl doesn't understand that's actually what she's wanting and needing. It's like, I think what Lindsay wants and needs right now is like a real partner by her side who can take in her vulnerability, hold her hand, and, kind of tend to the little girl in her, and someone to say, like, I see, hear, and feel that you're scared, and don't worry, like, I've got you. I'm not going to drop you. I'm not going to leave you alone in all this. Now, again, I don't know that Carl understands that that's what she needs, because I doubt Lindsay was really saying that that's what she needs. And so instead, as Lindsay, so I've got these internal needs that I'm not necessarily articulating. And so Carl then responds with, it's not that deep, is what he says, right? And I'm going to talk about Carl in a moment, because I feel stuff on Carl's side of this too. But Carl responds with, it's not that deep. Carl ostensibly is just responding to the surface of the situation. So if my impulses, Jamie, is correct, Lindsay is actually having a deep emotional experience. But again, because she's bracing against that vulnerability and she doesn't want to reveal that vulnerability, she is not articulating that she's having a deep experience, but she is having a deep experience. And then Carl responds with, it's not that deep. So I understand for Lindsay, in this place where there's kind of a disconnect between her internal experience and her external words and actions. And guys, this is where we talk about blind spots. I don't think Lindsay is consciously aware of this disconnect. I think Lindsay is only semi-consciously aware that she's got deep needs here. And then she's got someone who's supposed to be her partner in crime, like her protector, her safe space, saying it's not that deep. I can understand why she processes this as, you're diminishing me. You're diminishing my feelings, because he's not recognizing how deep this is for her. Again, because I think she's not articulating how deep this is for her. And so then as Lindsay, if I stay with this for a moment, it's really, oh God, it kind of breaks my heart for her. Like, again, as Lindsay, the way I experience this, if this is right, it's just this fearful place of, oh shit, I'm going to be all on my own with this. It's like, as Lindsay, not only am I sort of potentially marching into the lion's den where these girls are going to sort of be mean to me and exclude me and attack me for who I am and for what I'm doing, but then, like, I'm going to be left alone there. Like, I'm going to turn to Carl for support, and he's going to basically kind of energetically take their side by saying, hey, it's not that deep, calm down. It's like, as Lindsay, it's so interesting, right? I find this so fascinating because in a way, we all kind of saw Lindsay gaslight Carl in the sense that she did these very provocative, inflammatory things. Carl then had a reaction, and then she used his reaction against him and tried to tell him that, basically she was projecting all the stuff she was doing onto him, right? In terms of, you're not giving me space for my feelings. You're not listening to me. You're being reactive. Everything that she was doing, she put onto Carl, even though she ostensibly created the situation. But what's so fascinating is when I drop into Lindsay, I really feel how for her, she feels gaslit in this situation, because from her perspective, it really is this experience of like, these girls are doing something to me. And again, it's hurtful and it's painful. And then other people in my life are telling me, no, that's not happening. No, you're overreacting. No, it's not that deep. No, you need to get over it. And as Lindsay, like, that kind of what I experience as abandonment it sort of cuts me even further. And it feels as Lindsay historically familiar. I just feel like Lindsay's got some sort of historical relationship to this experience of like, it feels like abandonment. And like, I've got to do this all on my own. And like, I'm out here calling for help, saying to people and loved ones, like, help me, I need help. And other people are looking at me saying like, get over it. This isn't a big deal. You don't need help. And in that place where I was already feeling hurt, rejected, vulnerable, alone, now I feel even more hurt, vulnerable, rejected, and alone. And again, I think this is information about why Lindsay would be so resistant or loath to ever reveal her vulnerability, because I just have this feeling like this tender spot where she's been excluded, rejected, abandoned, or hurt, I just have this feeling she got hurt there even more. Like she was in her abandonment wound, reached out for help, and people just dismissed her there. And there's this voice inside her that's like, I'm never going to like let people like have that opportunity to hurt me there again. And again, it's this feeling of like, I got to do this all on my own. And if I don't have my back, no one will. And it's like with Lindsay, she's such a powerful force of nature. It's like she will advocate for herself, and she will get activated, and she will put her dukes up, and she'll pile drive her way through a situation. But again, I just feel underneath it's protecting against such a deep sense of hurt and pain. And so, yeah, when I'm taking in Carl saying it's not that deep, as Lindsay, it's like, oh my God, they're going to attack me, and my very own boyfriend, fiance, husband-to-be is going to leave me there. And once again, I'm going to be left on my own to do this all on my own. And it is so fucking hurtful. And I just want someone to be on my side. And the bind here is that all of this is taking her, I think, into deeper levels of vulnerability. And the vulnerability is the very thing that she wants to avoid out of a fear of being hurt even more. So rather than, I think, pulling Carl aside and saying, look, listen, I'm trying to communicate something here. I am in a vulnerable place. I am scared. I am hurt. Rather than doing that, she instead makes him the problem, gets activated, puts her dukes up. And then, like I said before, of course, that ends up pushing him away even more. So having said all that, I just kind of want to also bring in Carl's side to this as well, because, you know, it's interesting. I really believe Carl when he says that he stayed calm. I believe Carl when he said he was trying to be supportive. I really believe Carl did and said all the right things externally. Notice the theme here. This is the theme of this podcast. The gap that might be between our conscious minds and our unconscious minds, between our external words and actions and our internal experience. No, but you know, I have this feeling. Well, and I mean, I think we've seen this play out on the show, right? But I have this feeling that Carl, there's probably been a pattern of Carl having to mitigate a lot of Lindsay's messes, you know? So this speaks to the pattern I just talked about. If Lindsay's going through life fearing vulnerability, bracing herself against it, and wanting a certain type of support from Carl that we could say is not actually the deepest level of support she's looking for, aka support for her wounded, vulnerable little girl who just needs someone to hold her hand and tell her it's going to be okay, but instead kind of seeking almost like a middle ground version of support where she's activated, where she doesn't have to risk the fear of vulnerability. She can have her dukes up in a way that feels safer, but she still wants that support from him in this place where basically she can kind of get nuts. And we've seen it. Lindsay can get nuts, and she causes conflict, and she projects. And I have to imagine there's probably been a number of times where she wants Carl on her side in those situations. And as we've seen, when Carl's not on her side, he ends up paying the price. And again, we saw this on the show last week. I mean, he basically ended up apologizing for something that he actually didn't feel sorry for, and that he probably didn't really have much to apologize for. So I think it's safe to say Carl by this point has probably spent a fair amount of this relationship having to kind of like meet Lindsay in this place of activation and sort of trying to get her needs met in a very convoluted way. He's probably seen her make a lot of messes. It's probably been frustrating for him. He's probably been holding a lot back. And so I have to imagine for Carl by this point, especially since, we're getting close to when he's going to break it off. So we know things have been building inside of him. I have to imagine for Carl, when Lindsay sort of goes into this kind of spiral, there's probably a part of him by now that's kind of fucking fed up with it. And I have to imagine that even though, again, I am sure he stayed very calm and I am sure he said and did all the right things, I have to imagine by this point, there's probably an underground, unconscious, unspoken edge to it. Like if I had to kind of articulate it, it's like, oh God, here we fucking go again. Okay, and kind of like limited patience. Limited patience. And, I just say this because I am also sure on a certain level, look, Lindsay, I do think is sensitive. I think she is perceptive. And I think we pick up on things, again, even if it's semi-conscious or unconscious. And I have to imagine on a certain level, like there's the layer that I already talked about where Lindsay just feels shut down because her deeper needs aren't getting met. But I also have to imagine there's something she's picking up on here in Carl that's kind of saying like, I don't want to fucking deal with this. And so I think like when I watch them, it's like they're both holding something back here. I think what Lindsay's holding back is like the deeper vulnerability that says, I'm scared. I actually care about what these girls think. I want to belong. I have a very wounded heart here. I just need someone to like be with me here in a really deep way. And then I think what Carl's holding back in these situations is the voice that just says, Lindsay, like, I don't fucking agree with you. I don't want to support you in these situations. We've got a real problem here and I'm fucking tired of this. So I think she's really sort of holding back her deeper vulnerability. I think he's holding back his rage. And then we're seeing them bump up against these edges with each other, right? I think that kind of nails it for Lindsay and Carl. The thing that I want to say, it's like what was sad to me, honestly, when I saw them make up at this last, it was sort of like a strange makeup. I felt like it was more brushing things under the rug than an actual makeup. But, they, for all intents and purposes, they made up. And, we saw them going to bed together and, cuddling and kissing. And it really reminded me of what we explored in the last episode I did about their breakup with Emily Hanks. I really still felt the love between them. I don't know if they're right for each other, and I have something to say about that, but I really do feel the love they have for one another. And, it just made me sad because I just sort of really saw two people who at the end of the day, I do think deep down mean well. And like I said, I think deep down they really have love for one another. And it's painful for me to see them bumping up against these edges and to not have like either the awareness of what's going on a deeper internal level, or even if they do have an awareness of it, the willingness to sort of really lead with that and to have sort of truly open and vulnerable communication. Because it just makes me wonder what could have or would have happened if there were clear emotional transparency both within themselves and with each other. The last thing I kind of want to say about the two of them, it was really interesting to me to watch I think it was the final scene this past week, where Carl had an idea for his mocktail sports bar and Lindsay basically shut it down. And it's interesting. I'm seeing something. So there's a couple things I want to say about that. I'm seeing something very actually similar in Lindsay and in Kyle in their respective relationships, where it's like, oh, because, Lindsay had complained about Carl kind of earlier to Danielle that, he doesn't have the drive that she would like. He spent this money on a career coach. He said he needed time off. Like, I want drive. I want determination. I want him to have a plan. And, obviously I'm going on very limited info. I haven't heard Carl speak too much about this. But when I kind of took it in, my first instinct or hit on this was like, oh, like Carl needs time and space. Like he's in a process right now. And again, we explored this on the last episode. I talked about just how much change Carl has gone through in the last year and a half and how fast it all seemed. And I literally, I've been talking about this since he first got sober. I could just feel for him. This guy needs to slow the fuck down. Like it just feels like there's so much trauma for him to process now that he's sober. And so when I heard Lindsay speaking about this, like I said, my first hit was like, oh, Carl he wants to take some time and space. And it makes sense to me. He's a sensitive guy. He's gotten sober. Feelings are going to be coming to the surface. And it's like he wants a year or two to chill. And it actually felt really good to me for him. And I kind of wanted to support him to say, like, Carl, you don't have to hire the career coach. You don't have to figure it out. Like, you can go slowly. I mean, he's got a job, right, with Summer House. So as long as he's solvent and he's paying his bills, like, his sober, like, look, you guys, if you're doing something like getting sober, that's enough. It's a fucking enough. We live in such a culture of like, gotta get there, gotta do more, gotta do more. Getting sober or whatever the equivalent of that is, doing deep work on yourself, that is enough. Especially if you're sensitive, that is a fucking enough. Let me say it one more time for the people in the back. That is a fucking enough. Carl has a job. He's on TV. He's in the public eye. He's getting sober. He's tending to his mental health. He's unwinding decades of like built up sort of trauma and internal messaging. That's enough. And so when I was sort of like taking that in, I was like, oh, Lindsay, I don't think she knows how to accept him for who he is right now. I think she's imposing her own kind of type A drive forward onto him. And it's not really fair to him. And it's interesting. Part of the reason I'm bringing this up is I think it's so interesting because what I'm talking about in terms of this conflict with the girls is that Lindsay pulls back from her own sensitivity. She pulls back from her own, at times, need for slowness to hold space for her deeper vulnerability. Like in this case, her hurt in relationship to these other women in the house and what she needs around that. So it makes sense to me in a way that if Lindsay is so uncomfortable holding space for her own sensitivity, for her own need for slowness in the places where she needs slowness, for her own vulnerability, it's going to be very hard for her to tolerate it in other people. I think especially her significant other. And it kind of makes me feel bad for Carl because I think on some level, Carl probably externalizes to her the sensitivity, the slowness, the vulnerability that she has so much trouble tolerating inside of herself. So it kind of makes sense to me why she would want to shut that down. And I just brought up Kyle and Amanda. I mean, I want to keep this focused on Lindsay and Carl, but, you know, I really sort of see the same thing happening with Kyle and Amanda, where it's just like Kyle doesn't want to accept who Amanda is. I think Amanda's being very clear, and she's always been clear. Amanda's clear. I'm more concerned about home life. I want to be a wife. I want to be a mom. I am not super over passionate about work. I'm not a workaholic. I'm not super passionate about Loverboy. And if you remember, you guys, if you want to go way back, you know, for us OGs, Kyle was the one who got her to quit her job. She didn't want to. She had a full-time job that was her own job. And Kyle convinced her against her kind of inner knowing or her first, you know, her natural instinct to quit her job and join Loverboy. And I think it's just interesting to me because I see Kyle, he brought Amanda into it. He brought Carl into it. Kyle's a workaholic. He works from home. He works till 3 a.m. I mean, I've actually talked about this. If you want to hear more about Kyle's workaholism, I talked about this in my episode about Winter House like 3 years ago. It was the first season of Winter House. And I talked about kind of Kyle's relationship to drinking and just really talked about how I really see kind of like the work hard, play hard mentality as two sides of the same coin. One feels kind of like workaholism. The other feels like, you know, compulsive binge drinking. And what they have in common to me is just, it's sort of a lack of energetic boundaries. I don't know if I explored this in the actual episode, but I was really drawn to this idea of like what it would mean for Kyle to have stronger energetic boundaries in his life, meaning, you know, he's not bringing his wife into it. He's not bringing his friends into it. Loverboy is just his business. He leaves in the morning, goes to an office, comes back home in the evening. Work and home life are separate. And I can even feel, I mean, I'm not going to go deep into it right now, but I can feel it. Like the idea of Kyle having strong energetic boundaries between work life, home life, social life, it would force him to feel some things. It would force him to feel a deep rage inside of him. I think it would force him to feel a deep aloneness inside of him. And so I think he wants to sort of corral everyone. You know, it's one big party. Woohoo, Kyle, it's all one big party. Let's send it. And I think he wants to make work one big party and personal life one big party. And so anyways, I'm just saying he roped Amanda into this. And I think Kyle kind of feels like his workaholism is a virtue. A lot of times workaholics feel that way. He thinks it's a virtue that he's staying up till 3 a.m. He thinks it's a virtue that, he can't get off the computer and can't put down the phone. And he's got to realize it's not. And just because that's how he's inclined, it doesn't mean how Amanda's inclined. And it's interesting because I have a soft spot for Kyle. I like Kyle. Amanda on a personality level can be difficult for me just because, when she gets triggered, she we were seeing it on the show, her default is to get bitchy. It's to complain. If I'm being less than generous, it's to kind of whine and get cruel. These aren't necessarily attractive qualities. It doesn't make for fun television. But I have to say, when I sorted through all of that and just listened to the content of her message, I got it. I got it. It's like Kyle is not listening to her. He is not accepting Amanda for who she is, and he wants her to change, and she doesn't need to change. There's nothing wrong with who she is. Now, part of this is on Amanda as to why she's not having her own back and really following her own energetic boundaries. There's a kind of codependency there, I think. But I think both Kyle and Lindsay aren't willing to let their partners be who they are, because I think, again, if they were to surrender that demand on their partners, there'd be room and space for them to feel deeper things inside themselves. So the last thing I just kind of want to say in all of this is I'm still so drawn to Lindsay's sense of hurt in relationship to the other women in the house. It's so interesting. So if I just sort of drop into Lindsay towards like I'm just sort of picturing Paige and Amanda and Sierra, and it's just like, I feel like an outsider. I feel like I don't belong. I feel like they're the mean girls. I feel like they're mean to me. And it hurts. And again, like I said at the beginning, and I want to belong. And it's like that desire to belong, it feels like Lindsay's kryptonite. Like I said earlier, it's just like if they knew this part of me, it's so vulnerable and tender. That is where they could smash my fucking heart in two. And I get this image as Lindsay, as like when I sort of visualize them, I sort of see them as like the witches of Macbeth, like stomping on her heart and cackling. It really is. It feels like this experience of deep cruelty from other girls or other women. And I have to imagine there's some sort of historical pattern there, some sort of historical relationship there. And it's interesting because I think it's not totally unwarranted too. Like I think Paige in particular, not just Paige, Amanda too, like they get mean to her. And I'm not saying Lindsay doesn't play her part, but even in this last episode when I think Gabby was trying to broker kind of a peace between Lindsay and Paige, and Lindsay kind of let Paige know, like, look, I didn't leak this story about Craig. That was Danielle. And just even the way that Paige in her interview, I forget exactly what she said now, but it was just so nasty. It was like, oh, well, okay, you're going to try to broker a truce with me by throwing your best friend under the bus. That's really great. And it's just like, Paige, I mean, what the fuck do you want from her? Like, she's addressed, like, you came to her with an untrue accusation as like one of the reasons for your being a see you next Tuesday towards her. She's answering it. Like, what do you want from her? And I feel this thing in Paige and Amanda where it's like they won't cut her a break. I actually did drop into Paige towards Lindsay on Instagram, so I won't repeat that now. If you want, go check out my Instagram. For those of you who aren't on Instagram, if you're interested in my original content, just so you know, you can access people's Instagrams online. So if you just Google Jamie Stein Instagram, you could play my reel. I have exclusive content there. And on that note, I guess just as a little digression, I am really strongly considering creating a Substack account where I can kind of create a hub for all my content. So if that speaks to you, let me know if you'd be interested in that, because I really like the idea of having kind of a hub for everything. But yeah, like there is a kind of a vicious meanness that comes in where it just feels like there's a cruelty that they delight in. And even in the first episode where people were commenting on the good vibes in the house without Lindsay and Carl, and I want to say, I get it. Like, again, they play their part. I am not saying Lindsay is innocent in this. As I described, she disconnects from her vulnerability and then she gets activated and then she blusters and she alienates people. I understand Lindsay plays her part in this. But just, it's like they mention it once. Oh, the good vibes. Okay, cool. Like they acknowledged it once, but oh my God, how many fucking times did they have to bring it up? And there's just a certain point where it's like, I was just sitting there kind of saying, like, if you're constantly kind of sitting there gleefully and spitefully talking about the one person who's responsible for the negativity in the house, I got news for you. You're equally responsible for the negativity in the house, because if you're really this bastion of positivity and light and love, you're not going to be harping with glee and kind of like snootiness how much better it is without them there. Again, mentioning it one time, okay, but it was just sort of this repeated harping. So I guess this is all just to say, like, I think Lindsay is not totally incorrect that there is kind of an energy of cruelty that comes towards her, which again kind of activates this deeper vulnerability, which then activates her bluster, which then alienates the other women, which then causes them to get bitchy towards her, which then causes Lindsay to be on the defense. So this is sort of the big loop we're in. But, I think the work for Lindsay here, because this is sort of the work I ultimately do with people. It's like identifying the pattern and then really kind of identifying what's the bind that you're in. So if Lindsay's in a bind where she pushes away her vulnerability out of a desire to quote unquote protect herself, but then that very self-protection ends up alienating people and creating the very cruelty that she's trying to protect herself from in the first place, that's the bind, right? That's the sort of dramatic bind or the story she's gotten herself in. Well, then, kind of like any good movie, it's like, well, what's the key to unlocking the bind? And I think for Lindsay, she needs space to really get into deeper relationship with her vulnerability. And I think that if Lindsay could surrender her sense of fear, shame, and humiliation of that little girl inside and could really tend to her and have her back, then she'd be in a position to look these girls in the eye and rather than antagonizing them, saying, your behavior, I feel your exclusion and I feel your cruelty towards me and I feel your dislike of me and it hurts me so deeply. And part of me wants to connect with you and part of me wants to belong with you and let the chips fall where they may, but just to let herself lead with vulnerability, with Carl and say, I need something here. I'm vulnerable. Like my little girl needs your help right now. And I think, if she could kind of shift her relationship to that in such a way that she's willing to sort of use that fierce life force that she has when she gets activated to actually stand behind her little girl, kind of in the way that she wanted Carl to stand with her, and to realize there's nothing wrong with leading with that. And now that she's an adult, no one can really, people can hurt her there, but it's not a life or death situation. She can have her own back. I think the last thing I'll say about all this has gotten much longer than I anticipated. I think I just feel for Lindsay because it's like, there's a way in which when I take her in her energy, there is something there's something wild about Lindsay, which is, again, that's part of what I like about her. Her energy's different. She's not like the other girls in a lot of ways. And I think she's got a deep heart in her. And as I've said, I think she's got a deep sensitivity and a desire to connect. And it's almost like I can just kind of feel this place where it's like, maybe people didn't know what to do with her, when she was young. Like maybe for some people, like her wild energy and kind of like her type A personality, maybe it was too much. And maybe it did threaten or embarrass the other girls. And maybe people were like, oh, she's weird. Like, oh, we don't like you. Like, oh, you're doing something wrong. And it's hard because I think I just feel for Lindsay because I feel a place in her that wants to connect. And I feel that it's also hard for her to connect. And I feel like that's where she got hurt. And I feel like that's where she's protecting herself. And I don't know. I just as I talk about this, I feel this part of myself that really wants to create a safe space for Lindsay's kind of wild, weird, sensitive, vulnerable little girl. And for her to just get to know her on her own terms so that she really can have such a sense of deep pride, not just in her accomplishments, not just in being a fighter, not just being a successful publicist, but real pride for all these different parts of her, the weird, vulnerable, sensitive parts of her too, that feels things deeply and desperately wants to belong with people. All right, you guys. Well, that was kind of a cool little summer house journey. As always, follow me on Instagram if you're on it, Jamie Stein, JAMIESTEIN. Let me know if you're interested in my Substack. If you're interested in my work, I am offering these intensives now where, basically we do what I've kind of just done in a quick hit way with Lindsay of like really kind of dismantling a pattern for the deeper information, seeing what's your like unconscious bind, what are the unconscious choices you're making that are keeping your uncomfortable patterns alive, and what's the little adjustment we need to make, what's the space we need to create for a new opening so that you can kind of reconnect with your energy in a new way. So if you're interested in that, just fill out a really quick application. I'll put the link in my show notes. Send it to me. I'm working my way through the applicants. I only work with so many people at one time because it requires a lot of me. But yes, if you're interested, go fill out that application. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me. All right, you guys, I will be back soon. I don't know if I should tease this, but the plan is to come back with a Southern Charm episode. So I know a lot of you have been wanting that. I binged it all for the first time these last few months, and we're going to get into it. Okay, you guys, I will see you on the flip side. Bye.